The galaxy stopped laughing exactly 3 hours after Commander Nathan Cole hit the floor. The Grand Tribunal arena floated above the sapphire clouds of Centauri Prime like a cathedral built from starlight and pride. Its black crystal walls reflected thousands of delegates arriving from every corner of known space. Warriors in polished armor, diplomats wrapped in ceremonial robes, scholars carrying glowing data slates. Security drones drifted silently overhead, while translation chimes echoed through the immense chamber every few seconds. Nathan Cole walked through the crowd, almost unnoticed. At 6 feet 2 inches tall, the former Terran Marine looked ordinary compared to the towering alien species surrounding him. He wore no ceremonial uniform, only a weathered charcoal jacket over a simple gray shirt, dark cargo pants, and worn combat boots that had seen far too many worlds. A metal travel mug rested in his hand, steam rising from fresh coffee. Most delegates barely spared him a glance. To them, he was just another human security consultant assigned to observe the summit. Nathan preferred it that way. The laughter began near the central reception platform. Veyrath, captain of the Veyrath Honor Guard, stood surrounded by admirers and junior officers. Nearly 7 feet tall, with deep sapphire skin and silver hair braided with military insignia, she carried herself with the effortless confidence of someone raised among warriors. Her golden eyes spotted Nathan crossing the polished floor. "Human," she called loudly, amusement already coloring her voice. Several nearby delegates turned. Nathan slowed but kept walking. "Can I help you?" he asked. Veyrath smiled. "I simply wish to see if Terran reflexes are truly as legendary as the military archives claim." Before anyone understood her intent, she extended one armored boot. Nathan caught the movement a fraction too late. His foot clipped hers. Coffee splashed across the gleaming floor as he dropped to one knee. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Even a few diplomats failed to hide their smiles. Veyrath folded her arms, clearly pleased with herself. "Disappointing," she said. Nathan looked at the spilled coffee for several seconds. Then he calmly stood, retrieved the mug, and offered an apologetic nod to a startled service attendant whose uniform had been splashed. "Sorry about that," he said. He removed a handkerchief from his pocket and helped clean the floor himself. The laughter faded, replaced by mild confusion. Veyrath frowned. Most warriors would have demanded satisfaction. Others might have answered insult with anger. Nathan simply cleaned the mess and moved toward a different section of the hall. "You are not offended?" Veyrath called after him. Nathan paused. For the first time, his gray eyes met hers directly. There was no anger in them, only calculation. "Wrong place for games," he said quietly. "Something feels off." Before Veyrath could respond, every light inside the arena shifted from white to crimson. The music stopped. Massive security doors sealed with a thunderous boom. Across the vaulted ceiling, emergency warnings flashed simultaneously in 27 languages. And somewhere above them, hidden deep within the ventilation network, something moved. Nathan slowly set his coffee mug down. The arena fell into absolute silence except for the low mechanical hum of emergency systems coming online. Crimson warning lights washed across the black crystal walls, turning polished surfaces into rivers of dark red reflections. Delegates who had been laughing moments earlier now exchanged uneasy glances. Above them, the pleasant multilingual announcements had vanished, replaced by a steady electronic tone that echoed through the immense chamber every 3 seconds. Veyrath instinctively reached for the energy spear mounted across her back. The weapon remained locked. A blue status indicator blinked once, then died completely. Around the hall, dozens of warriors experienced the same problem. "Security malfunction," one delegate announced nervously. "Remain calm." Nathan did not look calm. He did not look afraid either. He simply stood motionless beside a refreshment table, listening. His eyes tracked slowly across the vaulted ceiling nearly 300 feet overhead. "What are you doing?" Veyrath asked, approaching him. Nathan ignored the question. Instead, he tilted his head slightly. The ventilation system released a soft rush of recycled air through hidden ducts. Most species never would have noticed anything unusual. Nathan noticed immediately. One section carried a different rhythm. For seconds. Pause. 3 seconds. Pause. "That airflow is wrong," he said quietly. Veyrath frowned. You can hear ventilation patterns? Former habit. Before she could ask another question, every holographic display inside the arena flickered simultaneously. The stars decorating the chamber disappeared. A new image replaced them. A black symbol shaped like a burning spiral slowly rotated above the assembly. Gasps spread through the delegates. Even Veyrath's expression hardened. "The Ash Choir," she whispered. Across the chamber, several ambassadors immediately stepped backward. Others looked toward the sealed exits. Nathan finally turned toward Veyrath. "Who are they?" Her golden eyes widened slightly. "You truly do not know?" Nathan shook his head once. "I spent the last 6 years on frontier assignments." Veyrath studied him with renewed curiosity. "The Ash Choir does not conquer worlds. They destroy alliances. Governments collapse after they arrive. Entire diplomatic networks disappear." A voice suddenly filled the arena. Calm, distorted, almost friendly. "Esteemed representatives of the Galactic Accord, thank you for gathering in one location. Your cooperation is appreciated." Panic erupted instantly. Delegates rushed toward exits despite repeated warnings from security personnel. The sealed doors remained motionless. Several overhead drones dropped from the ceiling, their systems dead. Nathan remained exactly where he stood. "Interesting," he murmured. "Interesting," Veyrath repeated incredulously. "We are trapped." Nathan pointed toward the nearest security officer. "Look at his wrist console." Veyrath followed his gaze. The officer repeatedly attempted to establish communications. Nothing worked. "Jamming," she said. Nathan nodded. "Not external jamming." He looked upward again. "Internal." Veyrath suddenly felt something unfamiliar. Unease. The human standing beside her had been publicly humiliated less than 10 minutes earlier. Yet while experienced military commanders argued and diplomats panicked, Nathan Cole seemed almost detached, as though he had seen situations like this many times before. Then the lights failed completely. Darkness swallowed the Grand Tribunal arena. Somewhere in the shadows above, metal softly clicked. Nathan exhaled slowly. "They are already inside," he said. Darkness transformed the Grand Tribunal arena into something ancient and unfamiliar. The elegant chamber that had symbolized unity only minutes earlier now felt like a cavern floating alone in space. Thousands of delegates stood frozen, their breathing and nervous whispers filling the void where music and conversation had once existed. Then emergency illumination activated. Thin strips of crimson light emerged along the floor, casting long shadows across the crystal walls. It was barely enough to see faces. Nathan immediately crouched beside the refreshment station. "What are you doing now?" Veyrath asked, struggling to hide the tension in her voice. Nathan removed a small metallic spoon from the fallen serving tray and placed it carefully on the polished floor. The spoon vibrated almost imperceptibly. "Listening," he replied. Veyrath stared at him. "You keep saying that." Nathan glanced upward. Sound travels differently when hidden compartments open. A deep metallic groan echoed somewhere high above them. Several delegates screamed. Small sections of the vaulted ceiling were separating. Circular maintenance hatches, nearly invisible under normal lighting, slowly rotated open one after another. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. "Security teams," one ambassador shouted. "Seal the upper access points immediately." No one moved. Most security personnel remained locked out of their own systems. Their weapons still refused to function. A series of soft impacts echoed throughout the chamber as dark cylindrical objects descended from the ceiling, suspended by nearly invisible cables. They landed silently among the crowd. Nathan's expression changed for the first time. "Everybody move away from those devices," he said loudly. Very few listened. The nearest diplomats merely stared in confusion. One elderly delegate cautiously stepped toward a cylinder. Nathan crossed 20 feet in seconds and pulled the startled alien backward just as the device projected a shimmering field of blue light. A section of the floor vanished beneath the field, revealing a maintenance shaft nearly 50 feet deep. Gasps spread across the chamber. "Traps," Veyrath whispered. Nathan nodded once. Designed to create panic and divide the crowd. More devices activated. Sections of the arena became isolated islands separated by force fields, hidden pits, and shifting barriers. Chaos erupted instantly. Delegates pushed in every direction, trying to regroup with their own species. Nathan climbed onto a nearby platform. "Stop moving," he shouted. The authority in his voice surprised everyone, including Veyrath. The traps respond to movement density. The more you panic, the faster they adapt. Remarkably, people obeyed. Even frightened diplomats recognized the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to command. Veyrath stepped beside him. "How do you know this?" Nathan did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the shifting lights across the chamber. "Because this is not an attack," he said finally. "It is an assessment." Veyrath felt cold despite the climate-controlled environment. Assessment for what? Before Nathan could respond, the distorted voice returned through hidden speakers. "Congratulations. Subject observation has confirmed exceptional pattern recognition." The voice paused. "Commander Nathan Cole, your reputation among frontier sectors appears justified." Every eye in the arena turned toward the human. Nathan remained perfectly still. Veyrath stared at him. "They know your name." Nathan slowly exhaled. "That is not good." High above them, something moved behind the crimson shadows. And for the first time since the lockdown began, Nathan Cole looked genuinely concerned. The distorted voice vanished, leaving behind a silence so complete that even the ventilation system seemed afraid to breathe. Thousands of eyes remained fixed on Nathan Cole. Diplomats whispered nervously among themselves. Several military officers quietly stepped away from him. Veyrath noticed every movement. Only minutes earlier, the human had been invisible. Now an entire chamber full of influential beings watched him, as though they had suddenly discovered a predator standing among them. "You know these people," Veyrath said softly. Nathan kept scanning the upper levels of the arena. "No." "Then why did they identify you specifically?" Nathan did not answer. Instead, he pointed toward a row of decorative banners hanging nearly 80 feet overhead. "Do you see those moving?" Veyrath narrowed her golden eyes. At first she saw nothing. Then one banner shifted against the artificial airflow. Barely an inch. "Maintenance drones?" she guessed. "Too heavy," Nathan replied. "And drones do not breathe." Before Veyrath could process that statement, the floor beneath her suddenly emitted a sharp warning tone. A blue circle appeared around her boots. Instinct took over. She leaped backward. The polished floor where she had been standing instantly transformed into a shimmering gravity well. Several nearby delegates cried out as loose objects slid across the crystal surface and disappeared into the field. Veyrath landed hard against a support column. A section of fractured crystal above her groaned loudly. "Move!" Nathan shouted. She looked upward. The massive decorative fixture suspended overhead had begun separating from its magnetic mount. The impact would not destroy the structure, but it would certainly crush anyone standing beneath it. Veyrath reacted immediately, diving sideways. Her left foot landed directly inside another hidden gravity field. Suddenly the world became impossibly heavy. She collapsed to one knee. The pressure increased every second. Warning indicators flashed across her armor display. Joint servos overloaded almost instantly. "Do not struggle," Nathan said, already moving toward her. "Easy for you to say," Veyrath managed through clenched teeth. "I weigh nearly 400 pounds in full armor." Nathan slid across the polished floor using the momentum from a nearby incline. He stopped just outside the field. "Your armor is amplifying the effect," he said calmly. "Release the magnetic spine locks." Veyrath stared at him. "How do you know Veyrath armor systems?" "Lucky guess." That was not a guess. Another warning alarm sounded. The decorative fixture overhead shifted lower. Nathan sighed quietly. "Fine. Your people use triple-layer stabilization anchors because your homeworld gravity is 1.8 standard. Release the center anchor manually." Veyrath obeyed without thinking. The armor immediately shed nearly 100 pounds of resistance. Nathan extended his hand. "Now." Veyrath hesitated only briefly before taking it. Nathan planted his boots against the crystal floor and pulled. Muscles tightened beneath his weathered jacket. Slowly, impossibly, Veyrath slid free from the gravity field. The instant she crossed the boundary, the massive fixture crashed harmlessly into the activated field behind them, suspended inches above the floor. Several nearby delegates stared in disbelief. Nathan simply released her hand and stepped away. "You came back," Veyrath said quietly. "You could have left me." Nathan looked genuinely confused. "Why would I do that?" Veyrath had no answer. Before she could respond, every light in the chamber flickered again. This time, a new message appeared across every holographic surface in the arena. Subject confirmed. Phase 2 commencing. Nathan closed his eyes for a brief moment. That, he said softly, is exactly what I was afraid of. The words remained suspended above the arena in glowing crimson letters for only 3 seconds before every display vanished simultaneously. A low vibration rolled through the structure, subtle at first, then stronger. Crystal walls hummed. Ceiling panels shifted. Somewhere deep inside the station, massive mechanical systems awakened after years of dormancy. Delegates instinctively gathered into small groups, fear overriding political rivalries. Nathan did the opposite. He walked away from the crowd. Where are you going? Veyrath demanded as she hurried after him. Away from everyone else, Nathan replied. The Ash Choir is studying behavior patterns. Large groups make predictable decisions. Veyrath matched his pace. You speak as though you have encountered them before. Nathan stopped beside a dark observation balcony overlooking the lower diplomatic tiers. I have encountered people who think exactly like them. He rested one hand against the crystal railing. Fanatics love certainty. Certainty creates patterns. Patterns create weaknesses. Before Veyrath could ask another question, a soft clicking sound echoed through the chamber. Then another. Then dozens more. Small metallic spheres, each no larger than a baseball, rolled from hidden compartments throughout the arena floor. Panic immediately threatened to spread again. Everybody remained still. Nathan shouted. This time, nearly everyone obeyed without hesitation. One of the spheres stopped less than 5 feet from a frightened ambassador. It projected a pale blue holographic grid into the air. Seconds later, dozens more grids appeared across the arena, weaving together like a giant 3-dimensional map. Veyrath stared upward. They are scanning us. Nathan nodded. Behavioral analysis. Stress response. Species hierarchy. Leadership identification. How can you possibly know all of this? Nathan did not answer. Instead, he stepped toward the nearest scanning field. The holographic lines shifted immediately, recalibrating around him. The surrounding spheres emitted faint electronic tones. Then something unexpected happened. Every sphere within 50 feet redirected toward Nathan simultaneously. Across the arena, hundreds of scanning devices altered course. Delegates backed away instinctively. The machines ignored everyone else. They wanted only one person. Veyrath felt a chill travel down her spine. Nathan. He was already moving. Get everyone behind structural supports, he said calmly. Now. Why? Nathan looked toward the upper balconies. Because they have finished collecting data. As if responding to his words, every sphere in the arena suddenly went dark. Complete silence followed. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then the emergency lighting failed again. Darkness swallowed everything. But unlike before, Nathan did not remain still. He moved immediately. Veyrath could barely track him. One moment he stood beside her. The next he had disappeared into the shadows between support columns. Nathan, she called. A hand gently touched her shoulder from behind. She nearly jumped. Lower your voice, he whispered. Sound carries. Veyrath stared at him. How did you move so quickly? Nathan ignored the question. He pointed upward. Listen. At first she heard nothing except distant breathing and frightened whispers. Then she recognized it. Soft footsteps. Hundreds of them. Not from the floor. From inside the walls. Inside the ceiling. All around them. Veyrath's eyes widened. There are too many. Nathan's expression remained unreadable. No, he said quietly. There are exactly as many as they think they need. He looked across the frightened assembly huddled beneath crimson emergency lights. Then he slowly removed the old silver watch from his wrist and slipped it into his jacket pocket. For reasons she could not explain, that simple gesture terrified Veyrath more than the footsteps. The footsteps stopped all at once. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise. Thousands of delegates stood frozen beneath the dim crimson lights, staring upward into shadows they could no longer trust. Veyrath tightened the straps on her damaged armor and watched Nathan carefully. The human had become strangely still, not fearful, focused. His gray eyes moved continuously, measuring distances, counting exits, studying reflections in the polished crystal walls. You have done this before, Veyrath said quietly. Nathan did not look at her. Everyone has patterns, he replied. Most people survive by following them. Professionals survive by breaking them. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting. A sudden metallic hiss echoed from the upper balconies. Panels hidden inside the architecture slid open with mechanical precision. Dark figures emerged onto elevated walkways overlooking the arena floor. They wore matte black environmental suits with featureless helmets that reflected no light. Each moved with unsettling synchronization. There were dozens, perhaps more. Yet none raised a weapon. None spoke. They simply stood and watched. Fear spread through the delegates like a living thing. Ash Choir operatives, Veyrath whispered. I have seen recordings. Nathan studied the figures for several seconds. No, he said quietly. Observers. Observers. The real operators are somewhere else. One of the dark figures suddenly projected a holographic image into the center of the chamber. A rotating three-dimensional star map appeared above the delegates. Red symbols rapidly spread across multiple systems. Gasps erupted throughout the arena. Several ambassadors recognized their home sectors immediately. What is this? Someone shouted. The distorted voice returned. A demonstration. Within 6 hours, synchronized attacks will begin across 17-member worlds. Communications networks will collapse. Governments will fail. Alliances will dissolve. Panic threatened to erupt again. But the voice had not finished. Unless one condition is met. Every holographic display shifted. A single personnel file appeared in enormous detail. Name, Nathan Cole. Species, human. Status, classified. Several sections remained deliberately obscured. Yet one image remained visible. Nathan stood wearing a Terran military uniform unlike any currently in service. Beneath the photograph appeared a designation. Arcturus Pacification Command. The arena fell silent. Veyrath slowly turned toward Nathan. What is Arcturus? She asked softly. Nathan said nothing. Across the chamber, an elderly Thwasian ambassador suddenly dropped his cane. His violet face had become pale. Impossible, the old alien whispered. Nearby delegates turned toward him. Ambassador Theron? Someone asked. The elderly statesman never took his eyes off Nathan. 30 years ago, Theron said shakily. The Arcturus border wars ended in 19 minutes. He swallowed hard. Official records claim a fleet engagement ended the conflict. His voice trembled. The classified version tells a different story. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Please do not, he said quietly. Theron ignored him. One human infiltration team entered the war zone. One team. The old ambassador pointed toward Nathan with a trembling hand. Only one operative returned. Whispering spread instantly through the arena. Veyrath stared at Nathan as though seeing him for the first time. The human who had cleaned spilled coffee from the floor. The human she had mocked. The human who had risked himself to pull her from the gravity trap. Nathan finally looked at her. There was no pride in his expression. Only exhaustion. I told you, he said softly. Wrong place for games. Then every observer positioned on the upper balconies simultaneously knelt. And for the first time, the entire galaxy began to understand why. No one spoke for several long seconds. The sight of the black-clad observers kneeling along the upper balconies unsettled the delegates more than any threat could have. The Ash Choir had spent decades cultivating an image of absolute certainty. Seeing them bow to anyone shattered assumptions across the chamber. Nathan looked upward, his expression unreadable. They are not bowing to me, he said quietly. They are following protocol. Veyrath turned toward him. Protocol for what? Before Nathan could answer, the distorted voice returned. This time, it sounded almost respectful. Commander Nathan Cole, the choir requests your cooperation. Surrender yourself voluntarily, and the 17 targeted worlds will remain untouched. Murmurs swept through the delegates. Several ambassadors immediately began arguing among themselves. Others stared openly at Nathan. One frightened representative finally spoke the question everyone was thinking. If one life saves billions. The sentence remained unfinished, but it did not need to be completed. Nathan had heard variations of it before. Many times. He slowly inhaled, then released the breath. No, he said. The simple answer echoed through the silent arena. The distorted voice paused. Clarify your refusal. Nathan stepped forward into the center of the chamber, illuminated by the crimson emergency lights. You are not here to take me, he said calmly. You are here to measure whether I am still willing to make the same choice. Silence followed. Veyrath felt the atmosphere change instantly. Even the hidden observers seemed to freeze. Explain, the voice demanded. Nathan looked upward toward the dark ceiling. Arcturus. The single word sent visible shock through several older delegates. 30 years ago, there were hostages. Civilians. Children. My commanders offered me the same bargain. Surrender one person to save everyone else. His jaw tightened slightly. I accepted. Veyrath saw something in his eyes then. Not fear. Regret. And what happened? She asked softly. Nathan remained silent for several seconds. They took the hostages anyway. No one spoke after that. The entire arena seemed to exhale together. The distorted voice finally returned. Your mistrust is understandable. It is not mistrust, Nathan replied. It is experience. Suddenly, a section of the arena wall became transparent. Beyond it, suspended against the brilliant blue atmosphere of Centauri Prime, dozens of small transport craft hovered outside the station. Through magnified holographic feeds, everyone could see frightened civilians inside. Families, maintenance workers, visiting school groups. Veyrath's breath caught. They brought civilians. Additional leverage, Nathan said quietly. The voice spoke again. Final offer. Surrender, and the civilians depart safely. Several delegates turned desperately toward Nathan. Veyrath did not. She continued watching the human instead. What are you going to do? She whispered. Nathan adjusted the cuff of his weathered jacket. The same thing I always do. Which is, for the first time since the crisis began, Nathan smiled faintly. It was a tired smile. The smile of someone carrying memories far heavier than armor. Find another way. Before anyone could respond, the station lights suddenly returned to full brightness. Every hidden observer disappeared simultaneously. The transport craft outside began moving. Not away from the station. Toward it. Across the arena, warning alarms erupted once again. Nathan looked toward the rapidly approaching ships and quietly said the words that made every veteran in the room turn pale. Everybody get away from the windows. Now. Warning klaxons screamed throughout the Grand Tribunal arena as the approaching transports accelerated. Their polished civilian hulls reflected the blue atmosphere of Centauri Prime, but something about their movement felt wrong. Too precise. Too synchronized. Nathan was already moving before anyone else understood the danger. Structural supports, he ordered, pointing toward the massive crystal columns spaced throughout the chamber. Move behind them. Stay low and stay together. This time, no one questioned him. Ambassadors, generals, scholars, and diplomats rushed toward cover with surprising discipline. Fear had erased politics. Veyrath remained beside Nathan. Those ships are full of civilians, she said. They cannot possibly intend to crash them. Nathan watched the incoming formation. No, he said quietly. They want us to believe they will. The first transport reached the station perimeter. Instead of colliding with the arena, it stopped abruptly less than 50 feet from the transparent wall. Then its engines shut down. One by one, every transport repeated the maneuver until dozens of vessels hovered motionless outside the station like silent ghosts. The arena lights flickered. Suddenly, hundreds of civilian faces appeared across every holographic display inside the chamber. Children sat clutching stuffed toys. Maintenance workers held one another tightly. Teachers tried to comfort frightened students. No one appeared injured. No one was restrained. Interesting, Nathan murmured. Veyrath stared at him. Interesting? Again. Nathan nodded toward the screens. Look carefully. Veyrath studied the images. Slowly, she noticed it. The civilians were frightened, but not terrified. There were no guards visible. No weapons. No signs of coercion. One little alien girl even waved curiously at the camera before her teacher gently lowered her hand. Nathan smiled faintly. Exactly. The distorted voice returned. Commander Nathan Cole. Time is running out. Nathan stepped into the center of the chamber. No, he replied calmly. Your plan is running out. Silence followed. Explain. Nathan folded his arms. The Ash Choir built its reputation on fear. You target symbols, governments, alliances. But you never target civilians directly. You remove confidence. You do not remove innocence. The arena became perfectly still. Even the delegates stopped breathing. Nathan continued. You brought civilians because you knew I would not risk them. But you also knew you could not harm them without destroying the mythology you spent decades building. Veyrath watched the holographic displays carefully. For the first time, she noticed hesitation. Tiny delays between responses. "You are testing me," Nathan said. "You have been testing me since I entered this station." The distorted voice remained silent. Nathan looked upward. "Arcturus changed all of you too, did not it?" A hidden door high above the arena slowly opened. A single figure emerged. Unlike the other observers, this individual wore no helmet. He was old, gray-skinned, frail. Yet the entire chamber recognized authority in the way he carried himself. The old alien descended slowly aboard a floating platform. When he reached the arena floor, he stopped 10 feet from Nathan. Then, before the eyes of the entire galaxy, the leader of the Ash Choir bowed deeply. 30 years ago, the old alien said softly, his natural voice replacing the distortion, "You saved my daughter during Arcturus." Shock rippled across the chamber. The old alien looked directly into Nathan's eyes. "You could have ended the war by sacrificing her. Instead, you chose another path." His voice trembled slightly. "Today, we needed to know whether humanity had changed." Nathan studied the old alien for several seconds. And the old alien glanced toward the civilians displayed across the screens. "The galaxy now has its answer." For several seconds, no one in the Grand Tribunal arena moved. The old leader of the Ash Choir remained bowed before Nathan Cole, while thousands of delegates watched in stunned silence. Outside the transparent walls, the civilian transports slowly powered down, their engines fading into quiet blue glows against the sky of Centauri Prime. One by one, the emergency warnings disappeared from every display. The crisis was over. Yet nobody seemed ready to breathe again. Nathan looked uncomfortable. He always had when people treated him like a legend. "Stand up," he said quietly. The elderly alien slowly straightened. "You saved my daughter," he repeated softly. "You crossed an active war zone to bring her home." No one could understand why. Nathan glanced toward the civilians still visible on the holographic screens. A small alien child was laughing now, completely unaware that an entire galaxy had nearly panicked because of her image. "Children are supposed to go home," Nathan said simply. "That is not complicated." The old alien smiled sadly. "For humans, perhaps." Across the chamber, delegates exchanged uncertain looks. Entire political doctrines had just been challenged by a single sentence. Veyrath stood motionless beside one of the crystal columns. Her golden eyes remained fixed on Nathan. She remembered the coffee spilled across the floor, the laughter, her own arrogance. She had expected anger from him, pride, at the very least, resentment. Instead, the human had cleaned the mess, saved her life, protected strangers, and refused to sacrifice anyone even when an entire galaxy demanded it. Slowly, Veyrath approached him. Every eye followed her. Without speaking, she unclasped the silver insignia pinned to her armor. The symbol represented her rank, her honor, and the military traditions of her people stretching back thousands of years. She placed it carefully in Nathan's hand. Gasps spread through the arena. Among the Veyrath, such a gesture was almost unheard of. Nathan looked down at the insignia, then back at Veyrath. "What is this?" he asked. "Respect," she answered quietly. "And an apology." Nathan studied her for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he placed the insignia back onto her armor himself. "Keep it," he said. "You earned it." Veyrath blinked. "Even after what I did." Nathan shrugged faintly. "Next time, maybe do not trip people during security incidents." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the chamber. Tension finally began to dissolve. Even Veyrath laughed softly. It was the first genuine laugh she had shared that day. Hours later, long after the delegates had departed and the civilian transports had safely returned home, recordings from the tribunal spread across every major network in known space. Analysts discussed military histories. Historians reopened classified archives about Arcturus. Politicians argued. Journalists speculated. But ordinary people remembered something else entirely. They remembered a human who had been mocked in front of the galaxy and had answered humiliation with patience. They remembered a soldier feared by enemies who still chose mercy when fear would have been easier. And somewhere aboard a quiet shuttle leaving Centauri Prime, Nathan Cole sat alone by the window, holding a cup of fresh coffee while distant stars drifted silently past. He never noticed the countless messages of gratitude arriving on his communicator. He was already asleep. Some legends are forged in battle. Others are forged in the simple refusal to stop being human.